Hello and good morning. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited for today's program. This is Scientists in Action Walking with Gorillas. I'm your host, Kate, from the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, where we're filming from our green screen studios today, and we have a very, very special guest. I'm going to introduce our scientist in just a minute here, but a couple reminders for everyone today who are on the call. If you're going to be our on-camera school, we're going to ask that you stay muted and off camera until we call on you for questions in about 30 to 40 minutes. If you have questions and you're not going to be on camera, that is awesome. We have an open chat. So students, teachers, whoever has access to that computer, you can be posting your questions there. So today we have an amazing scientist with us. She is Uganda's very first wildlife veterinarian. She's an author. She's a conservationist. She has founded some credible organizations. And I just cannot wait to give her a platform so that you can hear her speak. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Dr. Gladys Kalema-Zikusoka.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here today in Denver.
Awesome. Yeah. So Gladys, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what your background is, I guess? I cannot wait to hear your story.
Yes, I'm a wildlife veterinarian and conservationist, and I'm about to tell you my story through the presentation. I'm so excited to have written this book, Walking with Gorillas, which you see here, based on my conservation and leadership journey as a wildlife vet and conservationist, and somebody who got into conservation as a teenager when I revived a wildlife club in my high school in Uganda. Would you like me to begin the presentation?
Yes, we are ready when you are. We are so excited.
Okay. I decided to write the book Walking with Gorillas because of very many unique experiences I had, starting out as a child who liked wildlife and animals. And I felt that it was very important to share this story. And I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you here in Colorado. I grew up with lots of pets at home, and I was the last born of 6 children. That's me when I was 5 months old on my mom's shoulder. Because I was the last born, I was allowed to do what I wanted, which really helped. But I also had parents who really encouraged us to do whatever we wanted to do in our lives. So from a young age, I was able to follow a career that was very unique in my country. I became a veterinarian, and not only that, I also became a wildlife veterinarian. That's all my family. My elder brother, who is the youngest child the youngest boy in the family, was 10 years older than me, and he also really liked animals, and he introduced me to animals. He used to bring lots of stray cats and dogs home, which I fell in love with, and they became my companions because my sister was 5 years older than me, standing in the photograph. The second youngest person in the photograph was just outside my age bracket to play. So the pets became my companion. Sadly, my dad in the photograph was behind my brother, who was 10 years older than me. Sadly, he was abducted from home because he was a very prominent senior minister in the previous government around that time, because shortly after Uganda gained independence, he became a senior government and senior minister, and he did a lot for the country. He really wanted the country to develop. And then when the new president came in, President Idi Amin, he started abducting people, and my father was one of the first, sadly, who was taken away because he was so prominent in the previous government. And so I don't actually remember him, but we never saw him again when he was abducted from home. But we all grew up with this legacy that we wanted to continue his dream of a successful and prosperous Uganda. So my mom joined politics later when the government ended, the bad government ended, and all of us tried to do something. And I did it through my passion for wildlife. However, when I was still before I was 10 years old, not only did we have lots of cats and dogs at home, but our next door neighbor, the Cuban ambassador to Uganda, had a pet vervet monkey. This vervet monkey used to like coming home sitting on the fence, staring down at me as a child. And I was always so fascinated that his fingers and fingernails looked just like me, just like mine. And then he would jump down, and when I wasn't looking, he would pull the cats and dogs' tails, steal food from the kitchen. He was a very naughty monkey. But one time I was practicing the piano, and I realized that I wasn't alone, and I saw that he was watching me through the window. So I moved out of the room to see what he would do. He sat down on the stool and played one note with one finger. I was so excited. I realized that he was so intelligent. Not only did his fingers look like mine, but he could actually play the piano. And I think ever since then, I became fascinated by primates. So at the age of 18, in my last year in high school, I had the opportunity to revive the Chibuli Secondary School Wildlife Club. And this was a real turning point in my life. It was so exciting. I was also very excited to get the Senior Six Sciences Award. That's the first award I received for my work with wildlife and animals. And I was able to take the children to the national park. I got my mom to help me to develop stickers, which you see in there, help to uplift our environments. And she actually loaned me the money for the stickers. And we organized a trip to the national park. It was one of the first 3 national parks in Uganda. It was called Queen Elizabeth National Park. We spent 3 days and 3 nights there. It was wonderful being in nature, but I was saddened by the fact that there was very little wildlife. There were no lions or leopards. There was very few elephants. Most of them had gone to the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo because of the conflict that was there during the President Idi Amin days, when animals started to be shot inside the national park, hunted in the national park, and it was even worse when they were overthrowing him. And so they actually said to us, we can go on a walking safari because there were hardly any predators. There were no predators. So we really enjoyed the walking safari, but I felt maybe I should be a vet who brings back the country's wildlife, having decided that I wanted to be a vet, having grown up with so many pets at home. And so I got a chance to study in London at the University of London, the Royal Veterinary College. And during the holidays, we were allowed to work with animals of our choice. So I came home, and one holiday I worked in the Entebbe Zoo. And it was more like an animal orphanage because they just took in animals that were orphaned. And one of the main species they took in was the chimpanzees. During that time, we had a lot of, there was a big bushmeat trade going on, and a lot of chimpanzees were being traded. Their mothers were too big to eat. They would eat the mothers, but the babies were too small to eat. So they would sell them to people who were interested in them. And because they looked so cute and vulnerable, people were willing to buy them, and they would end up at the Entebbe Zoo. And so that time that I spent there, I was there for a week. It was really, really interesting because I got to look after these really adorable baby chimpanzees. They were about the age of 2 to 3 years old. And they were very clever, like Poncho. They used to escape from these cages. As you see the cage as it looks, they'd open the wire mesh and run out when you're not looking and run around the zoo, which is very, very interesting and funny. And then you'd have to carry them back into the cages. And I noticed that they liked being carried back. They liked being hugged because they missed the hugs from their mothers. They still needed their mother's love and attention. But it showed me how devastating the bushmeat trade is and how we really have to try and stop it. And because these animals were still very attached to their parents, the chimpanzees. They still needed their mother's love, but they had been violently separated from them. And so I learned a lot from working at the Entebbe Zoo. And then I finally got a chance to work with wild animals. I worked with chimpanzees in the wild in Budongo Forest in northern Uganda under Professor Vernon Reynolds, who was a professor at Oxford University. This was a very exciting time for me. While I was there, I was looking at doing a study on parasites in the chimpanzees. So I was collecting their fecal samples, which they'll drop from the night nest. They'll lay their nest up in the tree, and then they'll defecate on the ground. And we're collecting those samples and checking them for parasites. So it was really interesting for me. It was my very, very first study of animals in the wild. And I really enjoyed getting up very early in the morning at 6 o'clock and going to look for these chimpanzees as they were getting out of the nest. And it was really, really exciting time for me. Then 2 years later, I got to work with the mountain gorillas in Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, which is what had always been a dream of mine, because I'd heard about them while setting up the wildlife club in my high school in Uganda. And this photograph was actually taken not at Budongo Forest, although I was wearing a Budongo Forest t-shirt. It was taken in Bwindi Impenetrable National Park. Because as soon as I arrived, I got a very nasty cold and flu. And as you know, when you get colds and flus, they spread very quickly at school. But then we can also easily spread them to the gorillas and the chimpanzees because they're so related to us, so closely related. We share over 98% genetic material, and we can easily make each other sick. So I had to spend a whole week trying to get better, but I was able to take a walk to the waterfall and be able to watch the birds as I took a walk to the waterfall. And by the time I finished, I realized how important it was to protect the gorillas from our diseases. So I finally got to see the mountain gorillas, which was so exciting. This was the first mountain gorilla I saw. It was called Kachipura because he has a broken hand. When they habituated them and got them used for tourism, a process which takes 2 years to get them used to people, they found that he had a broken hand. And he was so, when we met him, he was so gentle. He didn't run away. He wasn't threatening. He just stared at us. He was really welcoming and accommodating. And I stared into his eyes and I felt a very deep connection. And I realized just how closely related we are and how similar we are and how I should do whatever I can to protect them. And all through that month when I was at Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, my main role was to collect samples from the night nests of the gorillas. It was different from the chimpanzees. With the chimpanzees, they'll drop the fecal sample on the ground and you find it on the ground under the nest. But with the gorillas, you'd find the fecal sample in the nest because gorillas every morning make a nest every night before they go to bed. And in the morning, they defecate on the side of the nest. And when they defecate, you're able to collect the sample and look for parasites, bacteria, viruses, genetic material. You can do lots of studies, what they've eaten, nutritional studies. And so I was mainly looking at parasites and bacteria in the gorillas. So I'd collect the fecal samples and examine them under a microscope for the parasites and the mud hut where I was staying. And I'll do this together with the rangers and the trackers who would take me to the night nests. We'd generally have to first find the nests before we go to the gorillas. And my time in Bwindi was really important for me because I was able to understand also how tourism is helping the local communities. Many of them now had jobs because of tourism. 90% of the park staff were employed from the local community. Some of them could carry your luggage to the gorillas and make additional money as well, the porters from the community. And some of them had accommodation and places where they could sell food and their crafts. So I could really see how tourism was really uplifting this community. So it was very good for me. But I also saw how the gorillas could get sick from people. And the group that had more was visited by tourists. The 2 gorilla groups visited by tourists had more parasites than the 1 gorilla group visited by researchers in another side of the park. So I thought, well, it could be due to tourism, or they're stressed because of tourism or habituation. And it started making me realize that people can have both a positive and negative impact on the gorillas. And I really felt like I wanted to become a full-time wildlife vet. And I wrote to the executive director of the Wildlife Authority. And I said to him, this is what a vet does. Can you hire me as your first vet? And I was very excited when he gave me the job. And when I was hired, a year after I finished doing the study at Bwindi, just over a year after, as Uganda's first wildlife vet, the executive director, Dr. Droma, was so excited to have me on the team that he said to me, look, we also have other animals we want you to treat, not only gorillas. We actually have 2 elephants which are raiding crops in somebody's garden. And now that we have a vet, instead of killing them, let's move them. Of course, I was very excited, but I was also a little scared because in school I was only taught to work on domestic animals, like cats, dogs, horses, cows. I hadn't been taught to treat or move elephants. But however, I was able to work with the Kenya Wildlife Service, which was next door. They had a very big vet unit, and I was able to learn from them. And I participated when they moved elephants from a forest reserve, Mwea Reserve, to Tsavo National Park. And then when I came to Uganda, we were able to move elephants from that particular forest, it's a very small forest reserve, to Queen Elizabeth National Park, where I'd gone as a student in the wildlife clubs. And we worked with the animal capture expert from Zimbabwe, Clem, in the photograph. And he darted the elephants from the helicopter. And once the elephant was down, I monitored the elephants under anesthetic. And then we got the local community to push the elephant into the container. And once he was in, we had to reverse the elephant with anesthetic and then stands up, and then we start moving. So it was a very exciting operation. And it just taught me how complicated it can be, but how meaningful it was to do it with the local communities. And people were so excited. They never went to church that day. Everyone wanted to push the elephants. And some journalists put me in the newspaper saying, how big is the one, how small is the one who moves the elephant? That's what it says in Uganda. Because it was after a Uganda proverb where a mouse went up an elephant's trunk and killed the elephant. So they said, you can be really tiny, but you can put an elephant down. So it was a very exciting time for my country. We also got to move giraffes because there was only one female giraffe remaining in Kidepo National Park in the northern Uganda near the border of Sudan and Kenya. And this particular national park was remaining with one female and 6 male giraffes. So I was asked to move elephants from Kenya to Uganda. So we went with the 2 rangers from Uganda and joined the capture team of Kenya. So you can see all of them in the photograph below. And we moved three giraffes from Lake Nakuru National Park to Uganda. This giraffe they had to be less than 3 meters tall. So they were only about 1 year old, as tall as they looked. And we flew them in a big aeroplane called a military Hercules aeroplane, which was the only way we could transport them to Uganda. We couldn't take them by road because it was too dangerous at the time. And it was very exciting. We got to the national park and were able to release them into the national park. And there are the 3 giraffes we translocated from Kenya to Uganda. I named one of them Nakuru, another one Kenya. And then we translocated one male who were named Hercules. Sadly, Hercules was killed by a lion 6 weeks after the release. Can you imagine? It was so terrible. But anyway, it was a very expensive meal. But 15 years later, when I returned to the park as a board member of the Wildlife Authority, the numbers had increased to over 35 just by bringing in those 3 giraffes from Kenya. So I was very excited that we were able to bring a species back from the brink of extinction. And this was all written in a children's book, Gladys working as a wildlife vet, and also on TV on National Geographic and Animal Planet, BBC. And so the mountain gorillas is the main reason I was hired, because they were concerned that tourists were going to make gorillas sick with a fatal flu like COVID-19. And yet we needed the tourists in order for people to coexist with the gorillas, because the money from tourism was helping to lift people out of poverty. They were able to get jobs, and that meant that they didn't have to encroach on the forest or kill animals that they found, because they were benefiting a lot from tourism. So the group that I mainly worked with is up here, the Bwindi group, which was the second discovered population of mountain gorillas. The first one was in Karisoki, which was discovered by the late Dr. Diane Fossey. I mean, she carried out a long-term study on them. And we discovered a second population in Bwindi. And so we're very excited now to be able to work with the mountain gorillas in Bwindi. And that's what they look like. This is one of my favorite gorillas. He's called Kanyonyi. And he was born in the year that I started working as Uganda's first wildlife vet. So we had a very interesting journey together. And Kanyonyi's dad was the first group that was habituated with tourism, the Mubare group. And he grew up all his life seeing tourists because he was born as a baby. So when he became a big silverback after his father passed on due to old age, when he couldn't keep up with the group, Kanyonyi used to like frightening people to see their reaction. And everybody used to get scared, especially the tourists. But he was just a big playful silverback. Sadly, Kanyonyi died not because of human disease, but he fell off a tree and never recovered from the hip joint infection and fought with another silverback gorilla who wanted to take over the group and never recovered. But when I shared a tribute on Facebook, we got over 300 shares. Everybody remembers Kanyonyi and his dad, Ruhendeza, and how they had lifted them out of poverty. When I was having to treat gorillas, we had to justify why we treat them. And this is how you treat them. You have to dart them remotely. You can't touch them like a dog or cat. So I was darting them using a remote injection. And this is a gorilla called Karunji. She's with her baby on her back. Karunji is one of my also other favorite gorillas. She's still alive in the park, and she was carrying her baby on her back. And this was one of the first cases I had. This gorilla is called Kasigazi. Him and his group developed white scaly skin and were losing their hair. So I went to check on them, and I went to the vet from Kenya who had seen a similar disease in cheetahs in Masai Mara. We were able to treat this gorilla with ivermectin, and he recovered. But sadly, his baby brother was dropped by the mother because he was very far gone, and the baby brother had died of the same disease. And even after he had died, the scabies mites were still alive and crawling around. And so the rest of the group recovered, but we wondered where this could have come from. A few years later, another gorilla group got scabies. Then we also had a rectal prolapse in a gorilla when the rectum came out of the body. And this was Kahara. She's actually the older sister of Kanyoni, the gorilla I showed you at the beginning, and she always used to babysit him. So they called her Kahara, which means the nice girl who likes to help out the mom. She was always babysitting her little brother. And we didn't know whether it was human related or not. And there was a bit of a debate whether or not I should intervene. But we did intervene, and I operated on her, and she recovered from the operation. And part of the reason why we really also felt we should save her life, because she was a female gorilla and she'd go on to have 6 babies in her lifetime. So Kahara recovered, and when she became 10 years old, she left the group because she couldn't mate with her dad anymore, and she ended up joining another gorilla group. So we kind of lost track of her because she joined a group that wasn't habituated. But we believe that she's out there having babies in the forest. But everybody said to me that, look, the gorillas are picking up diseases because they're going outside the park to eat people's banana plants. And we were very concerned that as they're eating the banana plants, they can get exposed to human disease. Of course, people get very upset. This is a farmer touching his banana plant that a gorilla group had just destroyed. Actually, the M group, the Mubare group with Kanyoni and Ruhendeza. So not only were people getting upset, but they were putting out scarecrows with clothing which wasn't clean because they were not very hygienic. And this scarecrow with dirty clothing was chasing away gorillas, baboons, other monkeys, and other birds and other wild animals. And so because gorillas are curious just like us, they probably touch the clothing and the mite spread through the group. And so this human-wildlife conflict was leading to disease transmission between people and gorillas. And so over here, these little boys were supposed to be in school, but they were herding goats. So as you can see, they're not doing very well, and they're not looking very healthy. And as long as you have people who are unhealthy and are not doing well, the wildlife will also suffer, and the people will suffer. And so many people had to travel very long distances to go to see a doctor. So a lot of them were not going to see a doctor. I was asked to lead some health education workshops with the local community to talk to them about being more healthy and hygienic, so that when gorillas go to their gardens, they don't get sick, and also the communities are better off. And this was a turning point in my life where I realized that people lived so far away from health centers, and if you couldn't keep the gorillas healthy when people living next to them didn't have enough healthcare and enough social services. So we founded Conservation Through Public Health in 2003, and we're excited to be celebrating 20 years this year. And of course, in Bwindi, it's so easy for the people and the gorillas to mix, not only inside the forest when you're visiting them as tourists, but outside the forest, where they just come out of the forest. You can see there's a very hard edge between the forest and the park. And gorillas come out because this used to be where they used to range before their forest habitat was cut. There's another big threat of poaching. People in this part of Uganda don't eat gorillas. People in Uganda don't eat gorillas. In fact, the people who used to live in the forest before it became a national park called the Batwa, it was bad luck for them to look in the eyes of a gorilla. But people eat other animals like the small antelope called daika and bush pigs, and gorillas get caught in snares or sometimes get speared when they get into conflict with the hunters and the poachers. This is a gorilla that was ranging outside the park, Mwirima, heading Rushegura Gorilla Group. This happens very often. He was the lead silverback of Rushegura. So we founded Conservation Through Public Health to keep the gorillas healthy and their habitat secure by improving the health of the local communities and the health of their livestock and the well-being of the communities. And inside this Bwindi forest, which is the office, our forest from our office in Bwindi, you also have chimpanzees, elephants, 4 species of monkeys, including colobus monkeys. You also have over 200 species of butterflies and over 300 species of birds. And it's a very important area for catching water and modulating the climate. This forest is only 321 square kilometers. So we train the rangers to monitor the health of the gorillas so that they can recognize them and know which ones are sick, and we're able to provide timely treatment for those gorillas. They're regularly collecting samples from the night nests. These are the nests where the gorillas build every night, and as they get up in the morning, they defecate. So we train them to collect samples, which we analyze in our gorilla field laboratory at the Gorilla Research Clinic. At the beginning, that's the US ambassador, when we built a gorilla research clinic when he just started out. Him and his wife came to visit us. And then on the right is when we built a bigger permanent gorilla health and community conservation center with that view you saw from the window. And when we got funding from USAID through African Wildlife Foundation. So we're hosting 2 students from US and UK, and we're looking at parasites and stress hormones. And the person over there is a founder member of Conservation Through Public Health, which we founded together with my husband, Lawrence, and then Stephen Rubanga, who's in the photograph, a vet technician. Now, this gorilla is actually ranging outside the forest. If you can see, he's just left the forest edge, and he's walking to the local community area because he wants to go and eat people's banana plants. And this is something that happens quite commonly around Bwindi. Once the gorillas lose their fear for people, they spend a lot of time outside the park. And because the forest habitat is small and it's been cut right up to the edge, this happens very often. So we train local community members to also monitor the health of the gorillas outside the park. So over here, we're training the gorilla guardians to monitor the health of the gorillas outside the park. They also collect fecal samples from their night nests, bring them to us, and also look out for when they're sick as they herd them back to the park. And then on the right is the ladies who we work with. These women are really important in their community. They go to people's homes, talk to them about being healthy and hygienic, having hand washing stations outside their home so they can wash their hands after the toilet. They talk to them about not leaving rubbish around. They talk to them about not going to the toilet in your garden. They talk to them about the importance of planting trees, why they shouldn't eat wild animals in the forest, and how it's so important for us not to make the gorillas sick. So they talk to the communities about so many important things. They also talk about the importance of having the children who you can manage so that you're able to look after yourself. And we started a coffee brand called Gorilla Conservation Coffee. I have one of them with me here. And I named the first brand after my favorite gorilla, Kanyoni, so that when people go to visit, they could actually meet Kanyoni. And this was really great up to the point that Kanyoni died 5 years ago, coming to 6 years actually, end of 2017, December 2017. It was a very sad day when Kanyoni died, but we realized that his legacy can continue through Gorilla Conservation Coffee. And so the next brand is going to be named after another gorilla in the park. And currently we have a campaign to pre-order over 1,000 bags, 1,063, which is the current number of the mountain gorillas in Uganda, Rwanda, and DRC, the total population of the world's mountain gorillas. So we're excited that the number of mountain gorillas has grown over the past 25 years. In 1997, I got involved in the first census at Bwindi because the Bwindi population was discovered in 1987. So the Virunga population, in 1981, it was only the Virunga population that we saw. Then in 1997, the Bwindi population was counted, and we counted 300 gorillas in Bwindi and 350 in Virunga, making 650. And the last census, we counted 459 gorillas in Bwindi to add to the 604 in Virunga to make 1,063. We believe that the numbers are more even now because it's been 5 years since the last census. And we're excited that the numbers are continuing to go up. And this is because of improved veterinary care, more gorillas are surviving, improved community engagement, where money from tourism is shared with the local community so that they can coexist with the gorillas. The gorillas are healthier. The people are healthier because the gorillas are healthier because the people are healthier. They're not picking up diseases from people. And there's some of the money is going to fund research projects which help us to understand how better to look after the gorillas and their habitat. And so this is the global coffee brand that I talk about, Gorilla Conservation Coffee, where we work with local farmers who are bordering the park. As you're entering to trek gorillas, to check on the gorillas, you often find coffee farms, and these farmers are not benefiting from tourism, so they're still entering the forest to poach and collect firewood, and they're not getting a good price for their coffee. So we're paying them a good price for good coffee, so they don't have to enter the forest to poach and collect firewood. And we're selling this coffee all over the world, including America, through Cradle.com, New Zealand, UK. This lady over here, Vicky, has placed so many bags since the pandemic began, which has helped even when we had no tourists during the pandemic, kept people out of the forest because they were earning money through coffee. Sadly, we lost a silverback gorilla in the southern sector of Bwindi called Rafiki. He's called Rafiki because he's friendly. And because he's so friendly, he didn't realize that the poacher was bad. But what happened is that when the poacher speared the bush pig and the bush pig screamed, Rafiki attacked because he was scared for his family, and the poacher killed Rafiki. And so this is something that was very, very sad. And this poacher was given 11 years in jail. But when we met with the other reform poachers, they told us that we came with their wives and they said they urged their husbands to enter the forest to put meat on the table. So we found that we always have to meet with everybody when we have these meetings to discourage them from poaching. The community was very sad, and this community member who carried my bag had a mask in memory of Rafiki. And when we went to visit the group, the one that was heading the group was no longer a silverback. And some of the group members had left the group. It had reduced from 17 to 11. And later on, the group has started to build back up again. It was very devastating. But we realized that as long as there are hungry bushmeat poachers around the park, more gorillas and other animals will get killed. So we started to provide fast-growing seedlings, which are grown in a very conservative way. We're using proper soil and water conservation on a small plot of land. And it's 10 vegetables, and they're able to feed themselves so that they don't have to enter the forest to poach and collect firewood. And so we provided it to over 1,500 homes. And the poacher's wife was also a beneficiary of this because she was quite young, only 22, with 3 young children, and she really needed a lot of support. We are encouraging people to put on masks when they visit the gorillas because since the pandemic began, we understand that we can easily cough on gorillas and make them sick, but also we can cough on them and give them flu. So people now have to wear masks even after the pandemic ends. And we encourage the tourists to buy a craft because when a community member meets a tourist, they're much less likely to enter the forest to poach. We're so excited to host the US ambassador to Uganda, Ambassador Natalie Brown. She loves animals and wildlife. She loves writing. So she helped when we launched Walking with Gorillas. She was a guest of honor. And we took her to the gorillas. She really enjoyed meeting the gorillas, and she tweeted about it, the importance of wearing masks. And it's so important to have such high-profile visitors coming to visit us. I took my mom to the gorillas when she was 70 years old. That was my last year at the Wildlife Authority as their first veterinarian. And it was really nice to be out there. She was wearing a t-shirt from Taronga Zoo because they used to give donations to us a lot, veterinary drugs to treat the gorillas and other species. And it was really nice to take her there. She first was scared that the gorillas would be very fierce and dangerous, and she didn't want me to study them. But when she met them, she said, oh, they're just gentle vegetarian giants. And she also really got charmed by them. She's written a book about her conservation journey. Her journey as a female politician. She was one of the first female politicians in Uganda and encouraged other women to join politics. She's a very strong lady, and she's really encouraged me to follow my dream. And I also have 2 boys, Indigo and Tendo, who've been going to the national park since they were babies, a few months old. And Indigo recognized his first elephant in the national park and a lion in a tree. And Tendo, the baboons. He was always fascinated by baboons as a child. And they really love nature. They love animals. They love playing with the children in the Bwindi community. They love playing soccer with them. And we spaced them the same spacing as the gorillas and the chimpanzees. That's outside the forest in Bwindi. And this particular lady called Zane Verji is a very important presenter on CNN. And she came to interview me for African Voices and encouraged me to write because she said it's so important to write your stories so that people can learn from them and be inspired. So my son Indigo beat me to it. He wrote a book, Zookeeper for a Week, about his working at the zoo when he was 13 years old, having had a soccer injury and couldn't go to soccer camp. We convinced him to go to the zoo, and he had the most interesting week. He was a junior zookeeper. He helped with everything at the zoo. He even got peed on by a lion. So if you read this book, you really learn about his interesting adventures. And he got to look after all the species in the zoo, apart from the chimpanzees, because he was under 15 years old, and they were worried that he could make them sick. But he really enjoyed working at the zoo, and he wrote about it during the COVID pandemic when he was 16, and he was doing a lot of work from home because children weren't allowed to go to school in Uganda, just like in the US. And so we're very excited that last year the book won the Moonbeam Children's Award for pets and animal in the non-fiction category. And then his younger brother Tendo used to accompany me a lot when we were training the rangers about preventing COVID between people and gorillas, and our community volunteers who you saw in the photograph, the gorilla guardians and the village health and conservation teams. And so he wrote an article for the local newspaper about COVID and gorillas. And we have started a STEAM project, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, working closely with Laura and the Global Green STEM. We go in and work with 10 to 24-year-olds, teaching them to come up with projects to reduce threats to the gorillas and other animals. And some of them include recycling projects, and some of them put up recycling plants. Some of them are doing nice backyard chickens and goats so that their parents don't have to enter the forest to poach. They're planting vegetables in a sustainable way. And all of this is helping them to reduce the impact on the gorillas and other wildlife. We're so excited. It was funded by National Geographic, and we're still looking for other donors to continue it. And we've met with, we're working with 20 groups, and we're reaching as many as over 2,000 community members through this program, which is very exciting. I'm so excited to become a United Nations Environment Program Champion of the Earth Award for Science and Innovation for the work that we're doing with the mountain gorillas, improving the health of the communities and the gorillas together. And I also mentioned that importance of having local champions, like the children who are engaging in the STEM projects, to be able to be the leaders in their community and countries. So I was very excited to get an honorary doctorate for our work with mountain gorillas from my old vet school, and excited that the book came out in America this year in March, and it's been launched in Uganda, in the UK, South Africa, and Kenya, and soon to be launched in other countries, but available in all these other countries. So I hope you get to enjoy reading Walking with Gorillas. And this year we celebrate 20 years, so it's very exciting for us. We became a non-profit 20 years ago. I'm here in America and later Ugandan NGO. So visit us, follow us on social media and learn about our work, give a donation towards our work. Come and learn about our work by visiting Uganda and interacting with all the other children at Bwindi, just like my sons have done. Thank you so much. The Museum Nature and Science. I'm so excited to be here.
What an incredible story. You've led a very interesting life, and you clearly have such a talented family. I just love all the different instances of the animals that you've, first of all, got to see and experience and work with and save, and just how much work you've put into uplifting humans and animals and the environment alike. Seriously, thank you, Dr. Gladys. What an incredible story. At this point, I would love to go ahead and invite some students to ask you questions as well. If we could go ahead and get our Eagleside Elementary School brought on camera. If y'all want to go ahead and unmute as well, I'm sure Dr. Gladys would love to hear your questions.
Oh, my camera's that one. There you go. Oh, I don't want me on that camera. All right, go ahead.
Hi
Yeah.
there. What questions do you have, my friend?
Nice and close to the computer.
I want to know how can we help the gorillas not be endangered?
Thank you. That's a great question. We can help the gorillas not to be endangered by
Yeah, you can go ahead and come over.
we can help the gorillas not to be endangered by making sure that they're healthy and they're not picking up diseases from people. So when we visit them, we should always wear a mask. We can support programs that improve the health of the local communities and the health of the gorillas. And we can also support the people living around the park by, maybe buying the coffee here in America, something you can do here in America, Gorilla Conservation Coffee, so that the money from the coffee then goes to support people who would otherwise be entering the gorilla's habitat to poach and kill animals and collect firewood, which destroys their forest home. So in all these ways, we can make sure that gorillas are not endangered. But we also want to expand their habitat. And engaging children in conservation means that they can do lots of projects which can stop the gorillas becoming endangered. So you can make a difference.
Very cool. That was a great question. One that I think we should all be asking after today. What's another question from Eagle Side?
There you go.
I was wondering
Nice and close.
why do gorillas walk on their fists?
That's a really interesting question. As much as we're so closely related and we share 98.4 genetic material, their anatomy is designed that they have to walk on their fists because they also live in a forest habitat. And sometimes they have to go under brush, in order to move from one place to another. So I guess God created them to be able to exist in their habitat. And so they walk on their fists, and so do chimpanzees. And that's the difference between them and us, I guess, the 1%, just over 1%.
Cool. That's a great question. I wondered that myself. Let's get another question from Eagle Side Elementary. Oh, looks like that might be their questions for today.
We have one more. Sorry.
Okay, let's go ahead and get it.
All right, go ahead, Evelyn. I would whichever one you want to, or I would ask the first one.
What animal adaptations do gorillas have? What adaptations do gorillas have?
What other adaptations do gorillas have in their environment? I guess they have like long hair, they're quite furry because they live in a very cold environment. When it rains, they can't run away and enter a house to get away from the rain. They can't put on a raincoat or rain jacket. They just have to stay in the rain. They just sit there and the rain rains and they just sit still until it stops raining, then they dry off. And gorillas it's interesting, when I first did a necropsy on a gorilla that had died, an old gorilla, I was really shocked because they had a really big, large intestine. And I was thinking, this is strange. I've only seen this in horses, but it's because they have a very high roughage diet. They eat a lot of leaves, shoots, and stems. And so they need a big digestive system to digest all of this. So they have a very big colon, and cecum. The large intestine is very big. So it doesn't look like a human's. It looks more like a horse, a big herbivore. So they have some of those kind of adaptations which enable them to survive in their habitat.
Oh, that is a really cool question. It just goes to show, it doesn't matter how closely related we are genetically, there are just still some things that are going to be different, and they might look really obvious or maybe not. So what a cool question. Let's go ahead, and at this time we have another school we're going to bring on camera. If we could go ahead and get Polaris to unmute their mic and join us on camera. We cannot wait to hear your questions as well. Good morning. Hi, we can see you.
Are mountain gorillas aggressive or not?
Mountain gorillas are not aggressive at all. As I saw, the very first gorilla I met, Kachupira, was very gentle, and all of the gorillas are very gentle. Mountain gorillas are only aggressive if provoked, and it's very rare. Once they get used to people, then they're not aggressive anymore. But the time that you're beginning to get them used to people, they'll be aggressive, obviously, because they don't know who you are. But once they get used to you, they stop being aggressive. So much as they used to say that King Kong is fierce, gorillas are not fierce. They're just gentle giants, just like my mom said when she met them.
Cool. And one of the things I want to highlight, actually relating to this from Dr. Gladys's book, is I just loved all the instances that you mentioned, how like strong their family bonds are, and it is kind of very humanizing, or in a way, or just shows how closely related we are, because they were really gentle with each other, and they took care of their babies, and they took care of each other, and it was really, really cool. So that was a great question from the classroom. How neat. What's another question from Polaris Expeditionary Learning School?
Yes, they have a very strong sense of family, which is just amazing.
Do you help giraffes get their babies out?
Yes, well, when giraffes are in zoos, you can help to get their babies out. In the wild, it's difficult because they're completely wild and you can't do much about it. But what's interesting is with those giraffes that we moved from Kenya, shortly after moving them, we were told that the only female giraffe, like a few months later, was trying to have a child. And she was basically, she needed help. So we flew to Kidepo National Park, and sadly we got there when she had just delivered the baby, and she died, and so did the baby die. And it was a female giraffe. So it was very sad that she died in childbirth, giving birth to a female. But because we had brought females from Kenya, the population has now increased to, over 35, and later when they brought more giraffes, it went up to over 50.
Sad. Heavy. What other questions do we have from the classroom?
Do gorilla siblings fight?
That's so cool. Just like you sometimes fight with your siblings, I'm sure you do. Gorilla siblings also fight. But it's not violent. It's just like you would play. They fight and then they're friends again. And this helps them a lot in their social interactions as a family, because later on in life, when they have to fight with other gorillas that want to take over their group, they learn those fighting skills as when they're still infants and juveniles. So yes, gorilla siblings fight.
What's your question, my friend?
What do mountain gorillas normally eat?
Mountain gorillas normally eat leaves, shoots, and stems. They like eating the stems of plants. They like the shoots. They only eat fruit when they're in an area where there's a lot of fruit that they like. So that's why they spend a lot of time on the ground eating leaves, shoots, and stems. And then not occasionally, but maybe 10-20% of the time, they'll climb trees and start looking for fruit, which they really like, depending on the habitat that they're in. They occasionally eat safari ants, and they really like safari ants. That's the only animal protein they eat. And when they're eating the ants, they hum because they're so excited.
Really cute. Also, I can't imagine how many ants they'd have to eat. They're so big. How big are they actually? I do see a couple folks in the chat have been asking how big are these gorillas exactly?
Gorillas can get really, really big. They can be, as much as 300 pounds or, 400 pounds. They can get really big, depending on the habitat, the area where you find them. But the silverbacks can get really big.
I'm sure
And they eat about 10 kilograms of food per day. Could you believe
that was
it?
my next question.
10 to
I was
20
like,
kilograms.
for an animal that
Depending
big,
on
they
how
have to
big
have
they
a
are.
lot of food.
Yes, but their food is not very, I guess not all that filling, so they have to eat a lot to have enough energy.
Very cool. Let's go ahead and get another question from Polaris.
How close related are gorillas to humans?
Gorillas share 98.4% genetic material with us, so it's very close relation. over 98%.
Antonio, bye-bye. Thank you. Oh, we have another one. Let's see. B. Oh,
In what way do gorillas help each other?
What way do gorillas help each other? Well, that's a really interesting question. Because they move in a family group, normally with one lead male called the silverback, he has maybe like 3 females with babies, and then there are blackbacks, which are older males, and then they move along together. They protect each other from other gorillas. The males are always there's always a male at the back and a male at the front to protect the whole family from any dangers. The babies play together. Sometimes some female gorillas will babysit another female baby, not only their own. And the little ones are always 4.5 years apart, because the older sibling can help to babysit the younger one and teach the younger one to play. So they have many ways that they help each other in that way. And they groom each other a lot. Gorillas are always grooming each other to remove insects, like gorilla lice or those kind of insects from each other. That's a very important thing that they do. And they're always grooming each other, all of them.
Very cool. That was a great question. More questions from Polaris?
Do mountain gorillas have similar bones to humans?
Do they have similar
bones to humans?
Similar bones? Yes, they do. I guess they're not all that different from humans. Yeah, they're not all that different. In some areas, they're bigger. They have a bigger cranium. Their head is bigger, and the male gorillas develop a crest when they become adults. So some of their anatomy is different from ours, but some of it is very similar to ours. They also have like air sacs, and when they beat their chest, you can hear a sound. And all of that is the slight differences that we have with each other.
Very cool. More questions from Polaris?
So from your perspective, do you think that, or like see that chimps are cute, fat, or maybe even both, or maybe more things that I can come up with, but maybe you can?
Okay, to see whether the gorillas are, the gorillas and the chimps, they're all like really, they're very similar to us. So they're very cute, they're playful, they have different personalities. Some of them are very shy, some of them are very friendly and playful. Some of them even want to play with the visitors who come to see them, the human visitors. They like showing off when the visitors arrive, especially the younger ones. They're extremely curious. And yeah, they have all those personalities. Yeah, they really do.
Cool. Let's get one last question from Polaris. Hi, friend. What's your question?
Hi, gorilla. What is your favorite animal?
Oh, I love that question.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
Oh, we were asking, are gorillas your favorite animal?
Yes, gorillas are my favorite animal. They are. I've spent so much time with them, and I've learned so much from them. That I feel like they're my favorite animal. Yeah, I really do. I feel like we're very closely connected, and we can learn so much from each other. And I've really learned a lot from studying the gorillas, and I've learned a lot how humanity should relate to each other as well. We should be more gentle and look out for each other more. And it's really been interesting being with the gorillas. But I love other primates too. I've noticed someone has said monkeys are their favorite. Chimpanzees are really cool as well, except they're very jumpy and aggressive. But yeah, I like all animals, and gorillas are my favorite.
Very cool. Well, I feel like I haven't even gotten to work with gorillas in the way that you have, but they might now have to be my favorite animal too, because they just sound so interesting. And seriously, thank you again for this incredible story you've shared with us today. Is there anything, kind of last notes you want to leave the students with today before we wrap up today's program?
Well, I'll just say that I want to thank you so much for all your interesting questions and your interest in our work. Some people wanted to ask what it takes to become a veterinarian. I think you can volunteer at your local vet hospital. You can volunteer at the zoo, like Indigo did with a zookeeper for a week. It was a huge eye-opener in what it's like working at a zoo. And this book is available. It can be bought here as well. It's also on Amazon, but we also have it here at the zoo. You can do, all kinds of things if you're able to follow some of what we're doing on social media or in our e-newsletters. You can learn about our work. But volunteering at the zoo, your local zoo, you can also come out to Uganda when a certain age, maybe when you're older, and participate in activities and see what it's like. But yeah, it's definitely a very worthwhile profession, and I'm so excited to have such a career. And I hope you're inspired to protect gorillas and other wildlife.
I'm definitely inspired. So very cool. Yeah, we will make sure when we share out kind of information about today's program to include different ways that you can buy Dr. Gladys's book, or even find the book that the rest of her family has written, because how neat is that? And really connect with some of those resources, because seriously, how incredible, especially if we have the ability to contribute to just this amazing cause. A couple things I want to go ahead and end on today. I want to say thank you, of course, to Dr. Gladys for being here. I know you're on this wild international tour right now, so I just appreciate you sharing your story and giving us your time. I also want to thank, you can't see them because they're not on camera, but they're in the studio. We have Lawrence, we have Laura, we have Maria, we have Asa, we have Kim. We've got a whole bunch of other people who've made today happen. And of course, all our friends in the classrooms who asked so many amazing questions. Thank you for your time this morning. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you
if you
so
enjoyed,
much.
yeah, of course.
It's been really wonderful. Enjoy reading the books, and let me know what you think of working with gorillas, and feel free to ask any more questions. I saw there were many more we didn't answer, but it's been so exciting, and I can see people waving.
Yeah, our classroom friends. We love it. If you enjoyed today's program, we do have another one upcoming this month, Scientists in Action, Anthropology of Death, with one of our curators here from the museum, Dr. Erin Baxter. We also, of course, have ways that you can connect with Dr. Gladys's organizations and her book and all these amazing resources. So seriously, thank you again to everyone who made today's program happen. This has been a real treat. So we will see you next time.
Thank you so much.